As long as I was going after the crooks that didn't have badges, I was everybody's hero.
Hi, I'm Vic Feazell, and welcome to another episode of the Vic Feazell Podcast. I'm here with my co-host, Jonathan Zimick, and we have an exciting episode for you today. I've been looking forward to this one. Actually, Jonathan and I and somebody else, can I mention her? Antonia. She's our new editor, and we've been working on this for, a year and a half? Something like that, when we first interviewed our special guest, Liz Flatt. And I'm so excited to be able to tell you about Liz Flatt. Liz Flatt is the daughter of Bob and Joyce Lemons. Bob and Joyce Lemons were so critical to the Henry Lee Lucas grand jury. They are the parents of Deborah Sue Williamson. Liz Flatt was Deborah Sue's sister. Deborah Sue Williamson was murdered, and her murder was one of the bogus murders that was pinned on Henry Lee Lucas by his bogus confessions taken by the Texas Rangers. You've heard us talk about that a lot. But Liz was interviewed by us. She tells you what her mom and dad went through. Both of them are dead now, but I knew them well. They came to nearly every day of my criminal trial after I was indicted and went on trial in Austin. They appeared before my grand jury on the Lucas matter more than once. And one time when Colonel Jim Adams called a press conference down in Austin to call me a liar and call Attorney General Jim Maddox a liar and call our grand jury a circus, Bob and Joyce Lemons were there. And when he finished his press conference, they stood up and had a press conference of their own and basically called him a liar. And everything that Bob and Joyce said has been proven out. Bob went all over the country spending his own money tracking Henry Lucas's whereabouts from the time he got out of prison in Maryland until he was arrested and put in jail in Montague County. It's very, very interesting. And it's a story that's still going on. Liz started talking on other podcasts. The media got a hold of her. And then, like so many times, the media can turn on you. And she had some people doing a podcast who actually turned on her. And Liz was only 8 or 10 years old at the time of this murder. She was a little girl. And this podcast totally turned on her because she wouldn't do what they wanted her to do to monetize their podcast. So I feel sorry for her. My heart goes out to her for a lot of reasons. But she's a tough lady, and you're going to like her. We like her. We love her a lot. We're going to start out by playing you just a little snippet from a Dallas news program from sometime shortly after the murder, not too many years after. Tracy Rowlett is the one that's doing it from Channel 8 up in Dallas. Some of you may remember Jonathan and I talking about him back when we sued Channel 8 because of what they had said about me and got me indicted and put me on trial and won the largest libel verdict in the history of the United States. My lawyer was Gary Richardson. Matter of fact, this past Monday, Gary stopped by to visit me. We got to say hi and hug each other. I hadn't seen him in years. So, hey, Gary Richardson, if you're listening to this. So thank you for being here today. One thing I want to add to is that we still have some of those bumper stickers. Be a thinker, use your blinker. If you don't like the way other people are driving, you think they ought to be using their blinker, send us a self-addressed stamped envelope to the Vic Feazell Podcast, 3302 West Waco Drive, Waco, Texas, 76710, and we will send you absolutely free one of our bumper stickers. Be a thinker, use your blinker. Thanks. I'm Vic Feazell.
I know Lucas didn't kill my daughter, and I can't let it just be closed. The murderer is still out there, and I want him found.
It's a story Bob and Joyce Lemons have told many times since Henry Lee Lucas was indicted last May for the murder of their 18-year-old daughter, Deborah Sue Williamson. A newlywed, she lived in this house in Lubbock. On the night of August 24th, 1975, she was brutally stabbed to death just outside the rear door of her house. Lubbock officials say Lucas is the killer, but the Lemons have always insisted Lucas could not have done it. but few in authority listened until now. When the Lemons were called from Lubbock and told their daughter's murder had been solved, they were overjoyed.
We were looking so forward to going out there, seeing this information, believing it, going home and saying, thank God it's over.
You wouldn't believe the phone calls I made that night, telling everybody it's over.
We were happy.
Finally over.
But that elation was short-lived.
The district attorney, Jim Bob Darnell in Lubbock, allowed us to see Deborah's file, allowed us to hear the tape where Henry supposedly directed George White and Jackie Peoples to the scene. This didn't happen. Henry Lucas never told them one direction. They took him to the house and insisted that he must know about it.
The Lemons made a written transcript of the tape. That transcript indicates detectives stopped in front of Deborah's house on 82nd Street, and Lubbock detective George White asked, "Does that look familiar?" Lucas replied, "I don't know." The car then turned left and stopped on the Avenue L side of Deborah's house, and White asks, "Do you want to look at that one again?" Lucas replied, "I guess it won't hurt to." White, "Turn around and go back to that one." The car turns around and drives back to Deborah's house. White asks, "You want to look at this one here?" Lucas replies, "Well, yeah, it looks familiar. It was whiter than that and had a porch. That changed, I guess." But at the time of the murder, the house was green. Lubbock District Attorney Jim Bob Darnell considers the tape evidence and will not let reporters listen to that tape. But he disputes the Lemons transcript.
I don't think it would be proper for me to comment on the evidence. That is their conclusion. I disagree with their conclusion.
The Lemons say Lucas' confession also stated he entered the house through the sliding glass door. But they say that would have been impossible because there was a huge china cabinet in front of that door. They also say Lucas said that he killed her inside the house. The murder actually took place outside in the carport area. They say their concerns fell on deaf ears, and frustrated, they took their story to the news media.
And we attempted to communicate with them and provide them with as much information that we thought was feasible as far as letting them have peace of mind about the investigation. And we provided information to them, gave them access to looking at the file, and even allowed them to listen to some tapes, which in hindsight might not have been the best thing for us to do because we had done it in good faith, and then he turned around and now has tried to more or less try the case in the news media.
He was absolutely amazed when we came out that we didn't believe all this now. And I could see that it was, he was serious about it. He was totally at all because we didn't buy what he was trying to sell us.
He was very upset because we found something wrong with the tape.
The Lemons say they have not been able to talk to Darnell since, and his office has refused to examine other evidence they say proves Lucas did not kill Deborah. Another charge Darnell disputes.
He has never directly given us any information. The only information that we have gotten indirectly from him would be through newspaper articles, TV interviews, or publications where he has provided them with information that he feels would be important in the investigation, and we have taken that information and tried to follow up on it.
The Lemons' frustration prompted them to investigate the case themselves. They've spent thousands of dollars of their own money following the Lucas trail, checking records and talking to relatives. Michigan prison records show Lucas was released August 22nd, 1975, a Friday. His relatives have told the Lemons and Maryland investigators that Lucas arrived in Perryville, Maryland by bus on a Saturday, just after he got out of prison. If that is the case, even Darnell admits the possibility of Lucas killing Deborah on the 24th would be unlikely. But he says that prison record may not be accurate.
So we have never been told definitively exactly what date he was released from the penitentiary. I would agree with you that if he was released from the penitentiary on the 22nd of August, that it would be very difficult for him to be in Lubbock, Texas some 2 days later.
Maryland trooper Fran Dixon has sent reports to Lubbock detectives on his investigation of Lucas' arrival and time spent in Maryland. He says the relatives have no reason to lie.
According to the relatives, he arrived here on or about August the 23rd of 1975 from prison in Michigan.
No one from Lubbock has gone to Maryland to check out the relatives' claims.
As long as the authorities up there are willing to cooperate with the authorities here, I don't feel that it's necessary for the people here to go up there and communicate with them.
With the help of a police officer, the Lemons also managed to get a graduation picture of Deborah shown to Lucas by Carolyn Hebener of Texas Child Search. Hebener says he did not recognize Deborah.
I told him that her name was Debbie, and he said, no, I've never seen her before, I'm not involved. And that was the end of it. I called Jim Darnell's office. They refused to talk to me. They had no interest in what evidence that I had at that time.
We talked with the Texas Rangers concerning that particular incident in which Ms. Huebner supposedly showed a stack, is what we were told, a stack of pictures of victims to determine, and that they did not feel that anything that he said during that period of time would be valid as far as determining whether or not he was involved in the death of her or anybody else.
Lucas did identify Deborah as a murder victim when Lubbock detectives showed him Deborah's wedding picture. But since then, Lucas has changed his story again. When investigative reporter Hugh Ainsworth privately showed Lucas' picture of Deborah, he denied involvement, marking no on the back and his initials. The 10 years that have passed since Deborah's murder have not been easy for the Lemons. They say immediately after her murder, the family was terrorized and were forced to flee their Buffalo Lake home just outside of Lubbock.
Starting with the night of Deborah's murder, we had people breaking into the house. We had threatening phone calls. The school told us they couldn't protect our kids anymore. They didn't want them there. And we'd be laying in bed at night and someone would turn a key in our door. And in order to save the two other girls' lives, really, we had to leave.
The Lemons and their daughters fled to Gainesville just 30 days after Deborah's death. They say their ordeal will never be over until the real murderer is found.
When you lose a child, it is very probably the most devastating thing that can happen to you. When you lose one to murder, I think it's even more devastating because you have all these questions in your mind about why, how, questions that you can't answer. The scars are there on us, and even more so on the two girls, and they'll never go away. It's changed our entire life.
I knew Liz's mom and dad real well. We've been talking about Bob and Joyce Lemons leading up to these episodes. Right. As we were talking about when the grand jury was on break, and everything that Colonel Jim Adams and Bob Prince and those guys were doing to try to derail our grand jury, and using Mike Cox, that reporter who is still with the Austin American-Statesman at that time, to just pepper us with all these negative articles. And by the time the grand jury got back, we had been on break over a week, maybe 2 weeks. And by the time they got back, they had read so many negative things that they had questions. And I'm so grateful that Bob and Joyce were there on that first day, because all that grand jury had to do was then hear from Bob and Joyce, and they were back online. Right. They were ready to work again. So Liz, Deborah Sue Williamson was your sister.
Yes.
How old were you when she was murdered?
I was 8 years old when Debbie was murdered in 1975.
And who were you living with?
I lived with my parents at Buffalo Lake, Bob and Joyce Lemons. Very proud of them.
Yeah. Did you ever come to Waco when you were a little girl for any of that was going on?
During that time, no.
They also came down to Waco for a fundraiser that I had, a big barbecue dinner, after I was found not guilty. And they drove all the way down here for that. And I don't know why, but I thought I remembered you being with them, but you weren't.
Yeah, they were very proud to know you and be a part of that.
I was so proud to know them because we had taken on something big, and it was fighting back. And then to come across three people who really, really helped a lot. Bob and Joyce Lemons, because they had worked so hard for so long. They spent $30,000 of their own money and spent
100.
100? Oh my goodness!
They had ended up spending a little over $100,000 of their own money trying to get Debbie's case reopened and things, to justice.
Wow. Well, when I talked to him at the grand jury at that time, Bob was still just getting started, and he had spent about 30 at that time. So you're telling me it went up to 100?
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
They ended up going bankrupt.
Oh my, I'm so sorry. I want to get into some of that with you and also about the fire. But when we came back to the grand jury, we had Bob and Joyce, and they had already heard from Hugh Ainsworth. And Hugh and Bob had done more work than anybody to figure out the truth about Henry Lee Lucas.
Yeah, they were very fortunate to meet up with Hugh Ainsworth because they teamed up together and finished the investigation and trying to figure out all his steps up to 79, I believe.
Yeah. And Deborah, your sister, she was murdered on August 25th, 1975.
She was murdered on August 24th of 1975.
Well, the police report is wrong. I'm looking at here. It says on August 25th, 1975.
In the report, they have it both ways. Depends on what page you look at.
All right. So according to the police report, she was found at 1:20 a.m.
It was about 1:10, I believe.
All right. Liz, how did you find out? You were just a little 8-year-old girl living with mom and dad. You had a sister that you looked up to. How did you find out she had been killed?
The morning of the 25th, my dad and Doug, which Doug was her husband, came into my bedroom. Doug was standing at the foot of my bed, and my father, Bob Lemons, was at my bed, up by my head, and he was kneeling on the floor. And he woke me up, and he told me that Debbie was gone, that she was murdered. And I can still remember it, the entire scene in my head, like it just happened. I'd never seen my dad cry, and trying to understand what he was telling me. But knowing that my dad was sitting there bawling, I knew something bad had happened, but I was still trying to understand what had happened.
How did that make you feel, Liz?
I felt lost, and I felt scared. I looked up to Debbie like a mom. She was a mother figure to me as well because of our age difference. And I had spent most of the summer with her since she'd gotten married. It was hard for me to understand. At the viewing, I think is when it first hit me the most, and it became real. And at that moment, I had to mature very fast.
So when they first told you, you were still confused. There was a lot of fear. But when you say the viewing, you're talking about going to the funeral home and seeing the body?
Yeah, at the viewing, I wouldn't leave her. They had to make me leave because I wouldn't leave her. And I just sat with her, and I caressed her hair and her face and her hands, which is how I identified a lot of her wounds, because I kept pressing her hair, and I saw that her looked like her ear had been severed, you know. And then I'd found all these right in here. And she wouldn't wake up because I kept asking her to wake up. That's when it became real. And my whole world changed at that moment. I just started, I kind of just sat back mentally and just started watching and listening to everybody.
Did you cry at the viewing?
Yes. A great deal, yes. The funeral itself was very, I guess you could say scary for me because of, as an 8-year-old and trying to understand and compute all this that was going on. My parents were devastated. Everybody was crying hysterically. There was hundreds of people there. They were everywhere. In 75, that just didn't happen. You know, you just didn't see that many people in one area. And I found it very scary.
I bet you did for an 8-year-old girl. Yes. Now, you have a younger sister too, right?
An older, Pam.
Oh, older sister. Okay. Was she around at that time?
Yes, it was me and Pam left still living with my parents at that time, yes.
What do you recall about your mom and dad?
I recall my mom being very, it wasn't her. She was very stone-faced. She was very not there. She just existed. She had a hard time responding if anyone talked to her, or she really couldn't handle to deal with anybody. She was just mentally not there. Very, very cold, very stonish. My dad was very trying to pick up the slack and be very attentive and help me through all that. He actually got me dressed for the funeral. I remember that I still remember that. My dad was everywhere. Yeah.
That was Bob. Bob had a lot of energy and he was a very caring person. Yeah.
Very caring, very, very protective. Also, we had a lot of family there. Our house was just full of cots and beds everywhere. We had a lot of people there staying. And then after the funerals, when the second nightmare started, directly after the funeral, getting home, that's when people started, someone started breaking in our home, and we had threatening phone calls.
Tell me about that. Tell me and Jonathan about that.
They would call and say, they would move certain things in the home, and then they would say, see, I moved it, you'll find it in such and such place. And my dad would go there, and sure enough, that's where that item would be. They also said that they got to Debbie, they could get to me and Pam as well. Had one that one time they had broken or had gotten in through my window, which we had 2-story home, and my bedroom and Pam's bedroom was upstairs. And they had gotten through my bedroom window and were hiding in the closet. And I had gone up there to get something out of the closet because we weren't supposed to be upstairs anymore because of things that were happening. And someone was in my closet. I remember them grabbing me, and I got away. And one of my aunts was at the doorway, and she started screaming. And then we just ran downstairs. my dad and Uncle Billy had took off looking, trying to chase them, but they never found anyone.
So was it a man?
Honestly, I can't tell you. During all these events, I had actually, as a young girl, had blocked all this out. They had taken me, I guess, to talk to somebody, and because of everything that had happened and recalling certain things, and they said they advised my parents not to remind me of things. When I was 15 years old, I was washing my hair in the kitchen sink, and all of a sudden it was like a door opened, and it was like a movie playing, and every single thing happened like it had just happened. Everything.
So you're saying all the memories came flooding back?
Yes.
Yeah.
As it had just happened, yes.
Wow. What did that do to you, Liz?
It was very traumatizing, and I was very upset. Of course, I'm 15 at this time, so I'm understanding everything that I'm seeing, and I could hear it, and I could feel it, and I was just kind of like paralyzed until it stopped. And then I got my mom and sat down, and I was crying and telling her everything that just happened. And she confirmed that it was all true, and that was exactly what happened. And I had blocked it out as a young child.
Now, at the time of these threats and the times that your home was being burglarized, just so that our listeners can put this in a frame of reference, this was before caller ID.
Oh, absolutely.
This was before home security cameras.
Absolutely, yes. I mean, this was 1975, so yeah, none of that existed.
So people could get away with these kind of anonymous calls back then, and it was really hard to trace a call because you didn't have all the digital footprints that are left today. It was just a shot of electricity going through a wire, and when it was gone, it was gone. So not much of a record. Unless they were calling long distance and paying for it. And that's not likely.
Yeah. It was very minimal technology at that time, very minimal.
Liz, do you know who found Deborah's body?
Initially, it was Doug. He couldn't get a hold of her, kept calling, and she wouldn't answer. So he had drove home, and he found her. The scene was extremely traumatizing and shocking for him.
So Doug had been trying to call her that day or that evening, and she wasn't answering. Where was Doug that he had to drive home?
Yeah, well, me, my dad, I'll say myself, my mother and father, Bob and Joyce Lemons, had gone, and Debbie had gone to eat at Pizza Inn. Pizza Inn is where Doug worked. He was a manager there. We'd gone there for dinner. And we had taken Debbie home. We took her home about 8:30-ish and dropped her off. Mother had actually gone in the house at that time with her because she wanted to show her the wedding dress. Her wedding dress had came back from the cleaners, and so she wanted to show it to her. And then she came back out to the car. I was actually supposed to spend the night with her that night, and my mother just said all of a sudden, no, you're not staying. Of course, back then you didn't talk back to parents.
Right.
You just accepted it, and I can remember pouting so bad in that back seat. I was pouting so bad. I was so mad.
So this was around 8:30 in the evening. So sometimes after you guys left around 8:30, and between the time that Deborah Sue was found about 1:20, 1:25 by Doug, so somewhere in there.
Doug called and talked to her around 9. They were really super busy. He wanted her to come up and help.
Oh, so Doug called Deborah Sue around 9?
Correct.
Okay, so then we know it was after 9. All right.
And she said she'd be up as soon as her show was over. I traced that, and so the show that she was watching was over at 9:30. And She was murdered between 9:30 and 10 o'clock.
How'd you come up with the 10 o'clock?
For one, it's on her autopsy report. She also, there was someone that drove by the house at 10 stating that they didn't see anything and no lights were on or anything at that point. So that also tells me that this had already occurred because the porch light was out.
Now, where did the murder take place?
It took place at her home in Lubbock, in the carport.
In the carport, so not in the house.
Not in the house at all.
Matter of fact, there was no blood or anything found in the house, and Deborah Sue had been stabbed numerous times.
Correct. She was stabbed 17 times as far as actual stab wounds. There was a lot of bruising on her face. And then she had other small cuts as well. But no, there was no blood, nothing in the house, on the car, or on the door itself going in the home. There was nothing disturbed in the home whatsoever.
So whoever killed her did not kill her in the home. No evidence of anything in the home. She was accosted out in the carport.
In the carport only, yes. That's the only place the struggle took place. That was factual. I mean,
that was backed up by the evidence. That was backed up by the police report. But then some years later, y'all hear that someone has confessed to this murder.
Yeah, May of '84. It was mid-May. And I remember I came home from work that night. They told me they had something to tell me, my mom and dad. They came in and they asked me to sit down. And then they told me that they found the murderer that, the person that had killed my sister, that they got a call that day. And it was, it was really hurtful, but then at the same time, you're so thankful that it's over. We had lived in secrecy for so many years, and it was over.
Were you still living in Lubbock at this time?
No, we had, in 75, I believe it was September or end of September of 75, that time frame, because the police had told my parents they couldn't protect us. And the school that I was going to said they didn't want me and my sister attending anymore because they were in fear of the other students' life. Because the school as well was receiving threatening phone calls as far as threatening me. So we just left with what was in the car. My parents had put things in the car and we left. And never went back to that house. We drove for hours and hours and hours. And then finally, we ended up at my uncle's house in Gainesville. And that's where we ended up moving, living. You
had to move. You had to leave Lubbock because of the threats from the phone calls and the burglaries and the harassment.
Correct. We had to leave because of that. My dad felt like, at that time he felt, he was just trying to save the other two girls because he felt like me and my sister were, were literally going to be next. And so if they couldn't protect us, then we had to flee, Do
you remember if anything happened that day that caused Bob to make it an emergency just to throw stuff in the car and leave?
My understanding, it was the same day, if I remember correctly. It was the same day that the school had notified my parents, and the police state telling my parents that they just couldn't protect us anymore.
So had the school just heard about the phone calls, or was the school also getting phone calls?
They were receiving phone calls.
So whoever was threatening you and your sister, they were calling the school and leaving threats at the school with whoever answered the phone there.
Correct.
Wow. Wow, Liz. That must have been very frightening.
Yeah, it was. There was also an incident at the school, at the playground area, at the edge. There was somebody in a vehicle, sitting on the hood of the vehicle in a black, very long coat. And they were trying to get me over there to them. And I got really close, and then the teacher had yelled at me to get back, and then they put me in the school. According to them, that this person was trying to get me to go with them. There was another incident at the lake itself, not too far from the house, where someone in a vehicle had pulled up beside me and was wanting me to get in the vehicle. I had a friend with me at that time, and she just grabbed my hand and said, "Run." And we ran directly to the house.
Frightening times. Hey, Liz, let's talk some more about that confession. So you guys find out that someone has confessed, said, "Yeah, I did it." And immediately there was a feeling of relief, of some closure. But tell us what happened next.
Yeah, we thought, again, we thought it was closure at last. And so that, if I remember correctly, that was on a Friday. And so Monday, my parents went directly to Lubbock and talked to Jackie Peoples, Texas Ranger, and George White, police detective. And I mean, my parents were all, they were just, like I said, they were so thankful that there was actually, finally closure. So they're asking why, how do you know this person killed Debbie? And they proceed to tell them about the confession. And, okay. And so then they let them read the confession. And when they were reading the confession, my parents were just very confused and had a lot of questions, and they didn't understand. They're like, this doesn't make sense. There was just so many things wrong in the confession itself. So they were questioning these things, and George White and Jackie Peoples got very upset about that. They did not like it. They wanted them to buy it,
Yeah, it's at the bottom of the police report here. Offense cleared on authority of Detective George White. So it was on his authority that it was cleared, that it was closed, based on a Henry Lee Lucas confession. And as I recall from that confession, Henry said that he attacked Deborah Sue inside the house.
Yes. Yes, the confession of Henry Lee Lucas murdering my sister was he entered the sliding glass door, which could not have happened.
Tell us why that couldn't happen.
There was actually a china hutch in front of the sliding glass door, so it was fixed not to be opened. They did not use it. So as far as inside the house, you couldn't even see the sliding glass door. So Henry proceeded to say that he entered the home in the sliding glass door. He found her in the bedroom, chased her around the house. And if I remember correctly, killed her in the bedroom or in the hallway, something like that.
Yeah, in such a manner that there would have been blood all over that house, all over the bedroom, all over the kitchen. There's even some talk about some scuffle in the kitchen. So
the house would have been just tore apart, and the house wasn't that big. So, it was just ridiculous. But yeah, factually, the house was not disturbed. There was not one thing disturbed. Even they made comments as far as how it was obvious nothing had been on the bed because the sheets still had their crease from being folded. But then Henry's, saying that he killed her in the bedroom, and there had been blood everywhere. The house would have been just, ransacked. He claimed that he stole some jewelry. Well, that was 100% incorrect. She did have some jewelry and some nice jewelry, but it was all there.
So apparently whoever killed her accosted her in the carport, stabbed her 17 to 20 times in the carport, and never went into the house. Or there'd have been some evidence of blood on the door or in the house, because you can't stab somebody 17 times without getting some on yourself.
Correct. So there was obviously, they just didn't understand, my parents didn't understand the confession and why they were saying, why do you believe this? There was not a struggle in the home.
Nothing from the evidence matched up with Henry's confession. Jonathan and I have gone over it before. We've read it backwards and forwards, and nothing matches up.
No. Only thing, there was one thing, she was stabbed.
She was stabbed, yeah. Well, we've heard some of those tapes too. Well, I think I might have shot her, Well, think again, Henry. Yeah, so we know how that goes. We've heard a bunch of those tapes.
Yeah. You want to take another look at that, Henry? Yeah, turn around and go back to that house.
Yeah. Also, I believe the house had been painted since the murder.
Yes.
A different color. And Henry identified the house as being the color that it was then, not the house, not the color it was at the time of the murder.
Right.
Yeah.
That is correct.
I talked to Henry a good bit about this case, and it was just almost comical the way he described them getting him to the house. Well, we drove around, then we went down this one street. Then we turned around and came back down the street again, then made the block and went down it again with them asking me, does anything look familiar? He said, they finally just pulled right up in front of the house. And I said, that might be it. And then he got the color wrong.
Correct.
Yeah, it's kind of sad. Why do you think that Detective George White and the district attorney wanted to believe this?
Well, in my opinion, they wanted to make a name for themselves. They wanted to close, and actually there was 3 cases. It wasn't just Debbie's at that time. There was 3. It was Elizabeth Price and Naomi Miller and Debbie.
Do you know if those cases are still closed or have they been reopened?
I know Elizabeth Price was reopened, and Naomi's was reopened eventually.
Eventually, okay. How long did it take them to reopen Deborah Sue's case?
November of 95, or might have been, 85 or 86. I'm sorry, I can't remember. Do you know the year?
I'd have to go back and look, but I know that while the grand jury was going on, it was still an closed case. Because I had a couple conversations with Darnell, and they were defending that case. They were that confession. The Rangers and D.A. Darnell.
Jim Bob Darnell. And to this date, he is a judge in Lubbock County. He's a district judge.
Well, I pray that he's learned something from this experience and that he has a more open mind and will look more closely at what comes before him. Sometimes we can learn from our bad experiences, and sometimes we don't.
Absolutely, I do believe in that, and but like you're very correct, and some people don't.
Some people don't, and if we don't learn from our pain, if we don't learn from our bad decisions and bad experiences, then it was just wasted. It was just pain and a bad decision, and a bad experience.
It's just a shame.
It is. It is. We all need to grow from our mistakes, grow from our pain, and keep evolving our consciousness. It's the only thing that's going to help us.
Yeah, and I do believe, too, that I think the Texas Rangers had a role in convincing Lubbock Police Department that, Henry killed these ladies in their county. I think they had a role in that.
Well, back then, if the Rangers said anything, you didn't question it.
Absolutely. So if the Rangers are telling them this, it has to be true. It has to be correct. I don't know that George White is a bad detective. I don't. But I do believe he was persuaded and didn't realize it.
Yeah, that's probably true. People like to jump on the bandwagon,
They just got in so deep that it was hard for them to navigate from that. I feel they believed that it would lose the public's confidence in them. And I think that's one of the reasons they stayed so strong with it for so long.
Mm-hmm. I agree with you.
It's very sad. But unfortunately, I do believe that. I just think, and then I do believe that, after Debbie's case was reopened, Jim Bob Darnell, I mean, he was madder than the moon at my parents. He hated my parents with everything.
Yeah, I picked up on that during my involvement in it. Yes.
Jim Bob Darnell and Bob Prince actually totally despised my parents with everything in themselves. And I do believe that things that transpired during 84 through 87, some events that took place, I do believe that the Texas Rangers and possibly Bob Darnell were a part of those actions, which I know at the house in Gainesville, there was a couple of times where someone had rewired outlets that when you plug something in, it would, hurt you shock you with a lot of voltage.
So that happened? That happened?
That happened.
Tell me about that.
Well, there was an outlet on the outside of the home that had been rewired so when you put something in the outlet, which the outlet my dad used to use some yard equipment, and when you plugged something into it, it shocked him really bad and knocked him back, and it was harmful, but it didn't, thank God, it didn't kill him. There was another situation where in my closet at the home, someone had rewired the breaker box so it would short to cause fire, and that was caught before it did because my dad became paranoid, and thank God to his paranoia, he found it.
Wow.
I do believe in 87, when their house burned down in Ringgold, I do believe they were behind, Texas Rangers were behind that as well. Can't prove it.
I understand. And during those same years, while I was looking into the Lucas and the Texas Ranger Task Force, my automobile was tampered with. I had lug nuts removed from the tires one time, all except just one, so that if I got up any speed, it would have broken off. Fortunately, I needed gas, and there was still a full-service station in town back then, and I pulled in, and he said, "Vic, you got to do something about this." And that was a pretty new car, too. My office was burglarized. Even the safe in my office was cracked. Not cracked, but opened. Somebody that knew how to open a safe. And the only thing taken from the safe were my Lucas grand jury materials. And my home was burglarized, and my dog was poisoned because they were illegally tapping the phone. So I know what you're talking about, Liz, and I don't doubt you because I know how they were.
Yeah, our dog was poisoned as well.
The reason they would poison the dogs is because they didn't want them barking when they would come around to tap your phone or to break into your house. And another reason they kill your dogs is because it just demoralizes you. It's like losing a member of the family. And that's what they did.
Yeah, our dog Duke, his name was Duke. He was very protective. So, and we lived in the country. He wouldn't have allowed them to come near the home. So I know that's why they had to have, that was one of their first things they did is they poisoned Duke. Didn't put it together till later, but yeah.
My dog was named Spanky, cute little Sheltie. And I'd come home from work, and I know usually Spanky would come greet me, and Spanky wasn't around. And I go, "Where's Spanky?" And my wife goes, "Gee, I don't know. I hadn't seen him." And so we went out in the yard looking, and he was laying there, and blood coming out of his mouth and nose. And we immediately picked him up and took him to our vet. And our vet examined him, said, "This dog's been poisoned."
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, your dad found out something else about this confession that made it awful hard to believe. And that's the date that Henry Lucas got out of prison in Maryland. It was only 2 days before this murder.
Yeah, August 22nd,
Yeah.
1975, in Michigan. Yep.
In Michigan.
I've got the original. I actually have the original document that my parents acquired from that prison, from the warden at that time. Yeah.
If you could email those, we'll post those on the website along with when we do this interview.
I'll have to find those documents because I have them, all of that documentation, which is a lot, and I have it secured in a location.
I understand. We do too. We hide all our stuff. We digitize it, and then we hide the paper. Yeah.
You might be interested, Vic, in there's also a letter in there from Botwell to Lucas.
Oh, I'd love to see that.
Yeah, where he's trying to convince Lucas to come back, if I recall, he looked forward to him coming back to
Georgetown, yeah.
Georgetown, and he would make special arrangements for him and Clemmy.
He was always using Clemmy. Either make arrangements so you can be with her, or if you don't cooperate with me, I'll make arrangements so you don't ever get to see her.
Correct.
He was tempted and bribed with either Clemmy or with strawberry milkshakes. The price of a confession, a strawberry milkshake.
Right.
So anyway, your dad, he went to up into the Northeast, into Maryland and that area where Henry's family lived, and interviewed them on video. It's old video, I think it's black and white, maybe. Been a while since I've looked at it. And they just sat there and talk about Henry getting back, how they picked him up at the bus station, or somebody brought him home from the bus station. And I think the Bureau of Prisons put him on an airplane. And, well, an airplane and a bus. Yeah, he flew a plane and then took a bus the rest of the way. Yeah. They paid $47 for that airplane ticket. You could fly cheap back then. And he was home. And they could account for him where he was every day for like at least 2 years.
Yes.
And the only time, he only left home 3 times overnight. And 2 times he had somebody with him who vouched for him because they were going out of town for a little job to do something to do with a used car. And then once when he went to Hearst, Texas with his wife, Betty Crawford, and another couple to pick up Betty's mom and bring her back. Yeah. And that was the only time. And they remembered all that. And they remembered, all the jobs that he had. And then we were able to get a lot of those records. Bob had already gotten a lot of those records. And then after Attorney General Jim Maddox got involved, when I invited him in to help, he assigned an investigator named Mike Ferry. And Bob and Mike Ferry went back because Bob helped Mike find all these backwoods places that wasn't even on the map. And there wasn't any Google Maps back then, you know? There was no Siri to tell you how to get there.
CB radio, that's about it.
You had to do everything the hard way.
You know, initially, Mom and Dad, after they read that confession and they knew that something wasn't right and they were not getting the cooperation with Lubbock PD and Texas Ranger, Jackie Peoples, and Bob Prince, you know, that was their thing, is they set out to try to prove, could he have even been in Lubbock? And that's when they started finding all this information, and not only clearing the fact that he couldn't have killed Debbie and the other two ladies, but so many other people.
Exactly. He was nowhere near Lubbock.
No.
He told me that when he was taken to Lubbock to confess to these cases, that was the first time he had ever been to Lubbock.
Correct. And it's amazing, what just amazes me is certain people still believe it.
I know.
I'm dumbfounded.
I can't believe it either.
I don't understand.
And some of them are in law enforcement. Jonathan and I have actually written letters to different sheriffs around the country who still have Lucas listed as a suspect on a murder that there's just no way he could have committed. You know, and so we will write them letters. We'll send them the documents because we'll find out about it through the internet or the newspaper. And then we'll write to them. And so far we've heard back from nobody.
Nobody.
Unfortunately, everything that I have learned in the last, 3.5 years, it's very unfortunate for whatever reason, and I don't understand it. The police departments feel that it would be an embarrassment and a humiliation, and they would have to, they will lose confidence, the public will lose confidence in them. And I don't understand that thinking because, quite frankly, that's who you want to trust, is someone that's being honest.
Right.
So if they come out and they say, okay, this was, a mistake, and they're going to make it right, and do everything they can to solve that murder, because obviously that murderer is walking free, I think they would gain public support.
I do too. And that's what I tried to tell Colonel Jim Adams when I sat and met with him in his office and offered to give him everything my grand jury had found if he would take it over and reopen these cases. And that's when he looked at me and said, no, I'm not going to reopen a single Lucas case, but I am investigating you. And that's the day the investigation of me started. And Ron Border, who is the one who had found out from someone in my office that we were going to be looking into Lucas, was the one who was assigned to investigate me. And that was his full-time job for 2 solid years. Also, he was involved in the smear campaign that Channel 8 did against me. All that was concocted by Colonel Jim Adams, too. So, I think...
Destroy you because you were trying to make things right.
Yeah. And if I had backed down, there was nobody else that could have picked up the ball, because the Attorney General can't call his own grand jury. And no other DA in the state was going to do it. So if they could get rid of me, they were through with the task force investigation.
You're so correct, Vic. And on behalf of my family, I just want you to know how much you're so appreciated. And I will always be so grateful for what you did. And I'm just so sorry for the price you had to pay for that. But thank you so much. My parents and having you on their side, it just made such a difference to them. And it's made a difference to me. And if you wouldn't have done all this at your sacrifice, unfortunately, nobody would know any of this. And the truth needs to be known.
Thanks, Liz.
And I'm so sorry, Vic. I know you paid such a huge price, and I'm just so sorry for that.
Well, you guys paid a price too. You lost your home. I know it led to Bob's early death. I know it led to your mom's early death. It's just a lot to handle. And you were coming up on this anniversary date. It's how long's it been now? 40-something years?
August 24th of 2020 was 45 years. I actually met with Lubbock PD on the 24th too.
I want to ask you about that, but I want to make one statement about what we were talking about before. And that is when you said that if they would have just come clean and said, yeah, you're right, there's no way he could have done this. Yeah, you're right, he wasn't in Lubbock, he couldn't have been here. They could have gone and talked to the same people that your dad talked to. And I agree with you. If they'd do what's right, it would make people trust them more instead of pushing their weight around. We were all up against people who their idea of law enforcement was just to push their weight around. Jim Adams, Bob Prince, Billy Bob Darnell, all of them just shoving their weight around. And that's not the way to do it,
No. Now, even as, today, and other, counties as well, if they would just admit, and just say, they know, it's obvious now with the information they know currently, Lucas could have not killed killed certain people on their case files, open them back up, and look at them again.
I agree. Liz, just this past Monday, you had a meeting with the Lubbock police, correct?
Yes, I traveled up there, and my meeting was scheduled with the assistant chief of police for Monday afternoon. I ended up meeting with a lieutenant and captain of the crime unit that they have there.
So the assistant chief didn't meet with you after you drove all the way out to Lubbock?
Correct. They said something come up and he wasn't able to attend.
So tell us what happened with these two that you did meet with.
Basically, the meeting went okay. They were appropriate. I was very appreciative to their behavior because they did not attack me. They did not try to upset me, which is normally how I'm treated. So I was very appreciative of that. There was basically no outcome. It was just, I'm here, and it's been 45 years, and I begged them to look into her case and certain things on the case. No promises.
Well, I'm sorry.
Time will tell, but I begged them. I did. I actually begged them. I said, every time someone talks to me, they're interested. They think, yes, that needs to be looked into. You're nice to me, cordial. Second or third meeting that I have with them, their demeanor changes, the way they talk to me changes. They shut me down. They're very attacking. They're hateful. Basically trying to get me to shut up and go away. And I just begged them. I said, I know it's coming above y'all. I don't know where it's coming from. You know, because the detectives that I've talked to over the last 3.5 years, I don't think they're bad people. I think they're probably very good detectives. But again, everybody does what your boss tells you to do. And I do believe that they were acting on being told what to do. But I just begged them. I wanted to stop here. I don't know where it's coming from. I don't know if the actions, the direction's coming from a particular judge in Lubbock or what, but just stop. There's no reason for all this hatefulness. Just stop. You know, let's settle the case.
Yeah. Yeah, let's work together.
Let's work together. There's no reason to be upset with me. You know, I know they were upset because I found a lot of documents and I found a lot of things that they did not. But every time I found something, I provided it to them. Information or contacts or documents that they didn't have. I always was very open, and it just seemed to make a matter that I found things and they didn't. Well, the reason they didn't is because they weren't never looking.
And we're not going to mention any names, but in addition to proving that Henry couldn't possibly have done it, your dad actually unearthed some suspects, did he not? At least one or two. I don't say any names or anything. And if you don't know about that, that's okay.
I know my dad had some suspects that he felt very strongly were suspects at that time. And I guess the proper term is people of interest.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, he spoke to me about a couple of them.
I do believe that my mom and dad's list of people of interest was due to what they knew at that time.
Yes. And due to the condition that her body was found in, and due to the fact of what was taken. And it wasn't jewelry. It was her wedding pictures.
Yeah, her purse and wedding album was taken, which she had on her.
Yeah, she had it in the car, yeah.
My opinion at this time of my list of people of interest are different due to what I have learned and discovered over the last 3.5 years.
Sometime, Liz, I'd like to talk with you again, and we'll talk about that once we've developed it some and see if there will be a place to plug it in. Liz, is there anything, I know you've got a trip to make. Is there anything I've forgotten to ask you or anything else you'd like to say?
I'll tell you, one thing I'd like to say is I don't know if I'm just that ignorant or what, but I don't understand why the Texas Rangers today don't try to make this right. I don't understand it.
I don't either.
They have, I know they've hurt other people. I know they've hurt other families, including you, but I mean, just speaking of my situation, the things that they have done that have affected my life, my parents' life, and has been so devastating and traumatic and has cost us money after money after money that we don't have. And now that my parents are both deceased, you know, it'd really be meaningful to me if someone from Texas Rangers contacted me and wanted to make this right. And all that would include is honesty, messed up, don't have to go into details, but you know what, we messed up. How can I help you solve your sister's case?
It's a word that gets thrown around a lot, transparency, but it's not something that people want to do. But we need it. We need that transparency. We do.
The people that are in the Texas Rangers today that are in the officials are not the same officials back then.
Right.
They don't have, you know, there's all different people in there now. And I'd be really appreciative. They'd contact me. Let's make this right. Hey, we messed up. It is what it is. But how can I help you solve your sister's case? And then do it.
One thing I am grateful for, though, is that I got to see Joyce again before she died?
Oh, that meant so much to her.
Having you and Joyce out to my house, it was during the Netflix filming. Taki Odom was there. Rob Kenner was there. He had the whole crew, lights, cameras, sound, everything. And we got to spend the day together. And I have some good pictures of all of us together. We're probably going to show some of those pictures during this broadcast when we air it. But it was so wonderful to get to see Joyce again.
It meant so much to her. You have no idea how much that meant to her. She was so ecstatic to get to see you.
Well, she was a sweetheart, and she'll always have a special place in my heart, as will you and your dad.
She always cared a lot about you, always. And matter of fact, she, to the day she died, she always had a photograph of you in the middle and my dad and herself on the side of you. She had that on her nightstand up to the day she died.
Oh, my goodness. Well,
That's
I
how
loved
much
her.
she cared about you.
I love all you guys, and I pray for your health and for your peace and your prosperity. Blessings. Anything we forgot?
Let me ask, Liz, as far as like what you know about the current evidence that the police may have, do you know of anything they have as far as like stuff they can DNA test or anything?
Yes.
Wow.
And that needs to be done. And what I'm finding out, because Jonathan and I are looking into several unsolved murders right now, is that sometimes they don't want the DNA tested because sometimes they know who did it. There's a murder right here in Waco where it could be solved with DNA. They have the DNA from the killer because he put out a cigar on her dead body. And a lot of people here in town think they know who that was. But getting the police, getting the sheriff, getting the DA to actually test that DNA. Now they're saying it's at the DPS, but they've been telling us that for months. How long does it take?
Yeah.
So we're going to start rattling some cages over that one too.
And Liz, do you feel within yourself that there's this burden to kind of carry this thing through to finding the real killer? Because obviously your dad and your mother put so much of their lives into it. I mean, do you feel like that ball's been passed to you now to kind of get it over with?
Absolutely. It is. And I'm determined this will not be handed down to my children. It's going to stop with me. One way or the other, I'm going to find out the truth. One way or the other. There is enough evidence to prove who killed her. It is my burden. Much so. Oh, I know one more thing that I don't know if you recall, I don't know if you're aware or remember, but you know, in May of 1983, Lubbock had ran Henry Lee Lucas fingerprints with the latent prints on file of Debbie's case, and they did not match.
Yeah, of course not. Yeah,
That was the next three.
Yeah, there was never any evidence that Henry left behind because Henry wasn't there. Well, look, I know you've got to hit the road. Drive safe, stay safe, and let's do this again because we're both going to realize there are things we forgot to say. So thank you very much, Liz.
Thank you, Liz. Thank you.
Thank y'all. I you know, Vic, I think a lot of you.
Thanks, Liz. I think a lot of you too.
All right.
All right.
Thank you, Liz.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.
Sometimes things happen that you never saw coming, like a sudden car wreck, leaving you feeling helpless and overwhelmed. You need someone who understands and genuinely cares about you. Vic Feazell is the experienced advocate you deserve, fighting for the compensation you need. Don't wait for the dust to settle. Call now, because consultations are free. And if we don't put money in your pocket, you don't owe us anything.